Okay, it looks like we are live and ready to go. Welcome everybody to the Barber Shop, where we're going to be spilling the gossip on the Canadian real estate market, anything that has to do Canadian real estate. So if you're new here, I'm Matthew Pfeifer, and I like doing these live chats to kind of talk with you guys and answer questions. I do have a script now below. You can check that out. Some of the topics that I want to cover today. But if you got questions, go ahead and just fire them in the chat section and I'll get to them. I got a computer over here, I got an iPad over here, so I can kind of keep track of everything. And this is in my brand new basement setup right now. So a little different look from the past barber shop chat. But let's get into things here. Let's start off with our first topic here. Actually, sorry, before we get into that first topic, let's just quickly chat about, kind of what I want here. Again, this is a chance to talk with you guys, answer any questions that you guys have. I might have a couple of guests joining us in the comments section. I do eventually want to turn this into having a couple of guests on this so we can have more of a conversation with you guys. I'm still learning how to do that all properly. So that's going to be coming in the future where we'll have guests on, different agents or mortgage brokers, home inspectors, something like that, to go over these topics together. But let's get into it. First topic, and I'm going to have to reference my show notes a little bit here so I can keep track of what's going on. And that is CMHC's housing market assessment. So this came out just a couple of weeks ago. I did a video on this, so you guys can check that out. I'll eventually, when this is not live, I'll put a card up there so you can check that out. But this is CMHC's not a prediction. That's definitely not what it is. What they're doing is they are looking at imbalances in the market. So this is giving each different city, they've got different ratings. They've got economists that go through this. And it is kind of an idea of what they see in the market right now. Now, this is not a prediction. Don't listen to the media when they say CMHC predicts XYZ is going to happen when they put out these housing market assessments, because that is not true at all. They say it right in their brochure and in the very start of the report. This is not a prediction. This is just looking at imbalances. Last time I made a prediction, it didn't go so well for CMHC. Evan Siddall obviously came out with CMHC and said that they were expecting a 9 to an 18% decrease in home prices over the next 12 months. That prediction was made in May of last year. That didn't go very well. I understand at the time where there was so much uncertainty, so much fear, we had no idea how much this pandemic was going to take out of the economy. We had basically the real estate market put on pause. And so I understood at the time the pessimism that CMHC had and a lot of people had. Where I had a problem was that CMHC stuck to that prediction well past the time when it was very obvious that this wasn't happening. We weren't going to see this 20% potential decline in home prices. So they stuck to it though, and they kept going, and they switched it from a 7 to a 10% decline, but then they took the timelines away. Again, it was very obvious that that wasn't going to happen. So that was my kind of concern with that. But if you look at that CMHC housing market assessment, they do talk about a number of cities that they had concern with. And I'm going to bring this up here. So hopefully this switches over for you in a second here. And let's quickly go through this. There we go. Different categories: overheating, price acceleration, overvalue, and excess inventories in the overall assessment. And they've graded each city here, so you guys can take a look at that. Canada obviously had kind of a moderate rating. This is degrees of vulnerability. But if you look at, obviously, Hamilton was up there, Toronto was up there. There's a number of cities here that they were seeing some fairly significant vulnerabilities, and that is due to things like overheating and inventory levels being out of line. So that's some of the stuff they're going through. If you want a deeper dive, I've got that in a separate video, so you want to check that one out. But that's kind of something I wanted to chat about here. The next topic, let's bring this one up here. Let's talk about interest rates. Give me 1 second. I'll switch the chart here. And Andre, thanks very much for joining. For those that don't know, Andre runs a small YouTube channel out of the GTA, and he actually, I think, held the record for the youngest real estate agent in Canada at one point. And Andre, put in the comments, I think you started at like 19 or 20 years old, but happy to have you along. Let's talk about interest rates, though. This has obviously been in the news now. Interest rates are on the rise from these absolute rock bottom rates that we had to start the year. And now we're starting to see them creep up a little bit. So fixed rates, those are up to about 2.1, 2.2%. Variable rates are still about 1.5%. But to start the year, you could get a fixed 5-year rate for somewhere in the neighborhood of about 1.7, I think at one point, might even been a 1.5. So really low interest rates. But let's talk about the impact that interest rates have on the real estate market. And Andre says he's still the youngest realtor. That's awesome. Interest rates. And again, always, guys, let me know in the comments what you think of these topics as we're going through them. If you have questions about them or just questions about something else, throw in the comments below and I'll stop and I'll jump to that. But one thing I think a lot of people misunderstand about interest rates in Canada and their impact on the market is they think, okay, interest rates drop, so there's all these buyers, they can go out and buy a house now. And that's not exactly accurate because of the stress test. So quick refresher on the stress test. Every single buyer that buys a house in Canada has to qualify under the stress tested rate. This was put in a 2016, 2017 time frame. This was actually designed to cool down the real estate market. At the time, there was concern that interest rates were going to start rising. They were worried about foreclosure rates as people were unable to pay these mortgages because interest rates had gone up. So they put together a benchmark rate, and you had to qualify on 2% higher than whatever you were quoted or the benchmark rate, whichever one of those was higher. So that took a bite out of a buyer's ability to buy. It reduced your buying capacity by about 20 to 25%. So the maximum you could spend based on that stress test rate. And they have never really been in line on that 2%. It's always been like 2.5 or 3%. Chris Pittman jumps in here. Stress test protects the economy. For those that don't know, Chris Pittman is a broker out of Calgary, runs a number of offices at Calgary. Fantastic guy that I bounce a lot of ideas off of. When I do my market updates, I always chat with him about things that are going on in the Calgary market. But that stress test was designed to make sure that buyers were qualified to actually buy if interest rates went up, they continue making their payments. So that if you didn't qualify in January 2020, and the stress test rate at that time was 4.99, interest rates obviously dropped very quickly in March, April, and May, but the stress test rate only went from 4.99 to 4.79%. So the actual qualification that buyers are being tested on didn't really change much. So if you weren't a qualified buyer in January of 2020, you didn't qualify to buy a house in January of 2021. So even though interest rates dropped, it didn't all of a sudden make a bunch of qualified buyers out of thin air. But it does obviously have a huge impact. Those interest rates being lower, it pulls demand forward. And what I mean by that is buyers that were already planning on buying a house is, say we're thinking, okay, I'm gonna buy a house in the next year or 2 years. And they've got their budget, they know what they want to spend. And most people think of purchases in monthly payment. They don't really think of it as what the total purchase price is, just that monthly payment. So if they want to spend $1,500 a month on their mortgage, well, when those interest rates dropped, the payment would drop. So maybe instead of $1,500, it's $1,300 a month. Now a buyer goes, fantastic, I'm going to take that right away. And then if you were spending $1,500, all of a sudden, because that interest rate was lower, you could actually buy more of a house. So maybe you were looking at spending $300,000 and all of a sudden now you're going to spend $350,000 because the payment was still $1,500 a month. So that's kind of what happened, pulled demand forward. And so Kevin Carlson here, I believe that we will not be at the stress test benchmark rate, in the next 5 years. And I agree, we haven't been anywhere close to that benchmark rate anytime through the stress test. So that is something where even though they've tested these buyers at significantly higher rates, we've come nowhere close to seeing those rates. And I don't know if we're going to see those anytime soon. Interest rates drop a lot faster than they increase. Dwayne, yes, this will be uploaded later for you to take a look at. So, and I'll put sections in it so you guys can jump the different sections. No favors. Which housing affordability do you recommend? Housing for a calculator. So I go use CMHC's tools that you can punch in and you can get a rough idea, but no online calculator is perfect. If you really want to know exactly what you qualify for, talk with a mortgage specialist, whether it's at your bank or a mortgage broker, because they're going to do your credit check. They're going to verify your income, verify your down payment, and they're going to be able to tell you exactly what you can spend. And it doesn't cost you a dime to make that phone call. So do that. Yes, Dwayne, yes, for sure. Thanks for checking in. So these rising interest rates, are they going to be a problem for the market? Yes and no. So if you were already planning on buying, people have probably locked in these rates, but the rates right now have only gone up on the fixed rate. They haven't really gone up on the variable rate. And the reason that is because interest rates, what you pay or on your mortgage, if you go on a fixed rate, it's based on the bond market rates, which the bond market's been on a little bit of a tear recently. The variable rates are based on the Bank of Canada rate. The Bank of Canada has been pretty committed that they are going to keep those rates low till probably 2023. And that's why you haven't seen variable rates change much, but fixed rates have started to change a little bit. So how much are they going to have? Yes, if interest rates go up, you are going to see people that are either spending less. You'll see a little bit of a lower demand, but had a rocket market in this country when interest rates were at 2.5% and 3% or even more. So yes, they have an impact, but as I'm going to get into later in this, and the thing I always talk about a lot is supply and demand is the biggest factor in terms of activity in the market. And when that changes or what factors play into that, we're going to get into a little bit later. ET jumps in. Thank you very much. So let's get into next section here. I want to get into the market overheating and talk a little bit about that here. Let me switch this up here. Okay, a couple of questions. Let's do those first. In the GTA West, where should we aim? We qualified $800,000. So let's answer Shiva's questions first. People always say, what should we do? And I'm always going to give you the same answer. You've got to look at what makes sense for your personal situation, whether it's a property type or a location, because buying a house has to improve your lifestyle. If it doesn't improve your lifestyle, and what improves your lifestyle, that's a very personal thing, whether it's being closer to family, having freedom and flexibility of buying a house, location, growing a family, whatever it is. But buying a house has to improve your lifestyle. So go look at what factors are going to improve your lifestyle, and then figure out what's important. Is there certain convenience factors of a condo, the freedom of a house, and start writing those things down, and then go after and find the best house you can, or condo, whatever it is that fit that criteria. So I hope that kind of answers your question there, Shiva, because there's no really black and white answer to that. Next question here. Is a possible interest rate hikes in the future may discourage buyers and thus more inventory? Yes, because these lower interest rates have pulled demand basically into the present. Demand that was going to be there in likely a year or two. People are planning on buying. So maybe somebody said, I'm going to buy a house in the next 12 months. I'm saving some money. Interest rate drop. They took advantage of it. So it pulled demand. So I do think if we see interest rates rise, we will see a cooling on the demand side of things. But I don't think it's drastic as some people are predicting. Let's go. Is there any negative to getting pre-approved 1 year before you're ready to purchase, trying to figure out what you can afford? No, you don't have to go through the full pre-approval, but sit down with a mortgage broker and have them go through, because there might be some things you don't know about in terms of qualification, documentation, or things you're going to have to do. So if you're thinking about buying in the next year or so, sit down, have that conversation with them. Plus, the advantage to that is if there are programs that are coming up, whether it's great cashback incentives or even mortgage helper programs, that mortgage broker is going to know about that. They're going to have to give you a call and say, hey, I know you're planning on buying it 6 months in the future, something like that, but there's this great option available. Do you want to think about this? So that's what I would do. Sit down, you can never plan too much when you're buying a house. You can never be too prepared because there's a lot of things, a lot of moving pieces when you find the right house, and you never know when the right place is going to come up. That happened to me. My wife and I were not planning on buying a house until June, July, August of this year. The right house came up, and although we had a lot of stuff ready to go and we were fairly prepared, we could have been much more prepared. And our mortgage broker will tell you that we stressed him out with having to scramble to get documents in place to buy this house because this perfect house came up that we had to buy. And so we made that decision to do so. Okay, let's get through a few more questions here. Do you think the price of single-family homes in Ottawa will get, there'll be a gap? Yeah, so single-family homes in Ottawa, and I think this is going to be something you're going to see across Canada. Single-family homes are skyrocketing in value right now, and that is because demand has shifted so much in favor of those single-family homes, and that was an area that we were already lower in inventory to begin with. If there was one segment of the market in Canada that we had low inventory to start before the pandemic, was single-family homes, and all of a sudden buyer demand shifted hard to that, and that's why they've gone up so much. And the gap from single-family homes to townhouses and condos is really starting to widen. And that, I think, is going to have a cooling effect on single-family homes later in the year. And that's why I've talked a lot about condos, specifically, I think, actually, but also townhouses are going to be much more in demand. That's going to be the story of the Canadian real estate market in the back half of this year, because those are now more affordable, and houses just become unaffordable for some buyers. So those are going to become much more of appealing options. So I think across Canada, you're going to see those types of houses become more of an option for buyers. So here in Windsor, we are getting priced out of a market by Toronto people. It's really hard to buy a house as a first-time home buyer. Yeah, I think one of the best examples I heard is if you dropped a rock in a lake and the ripples went out, that was the rock dropping in the center of downtown and people were flooding out of the Toronto market. But I also think that's going to work its way back. I think you're going to see that demand for Toronto return, and that will cool off that demand a little bit for some of those areas. But absolutely, those areas around Toronto, and this is Vancouver and a lot of other places, if people have the opportunity to work remotely, they may choose to stay in some of those smaller centers where they can buy more of a house or spend less money to buy what they're looking for. So I do see that cooling off later in the year, but it's not like it's going to return. I think you're always going to see more demand in those areas than we've had before. Kevin Carlson has a good one. Are foreclosure listings increasing anywhere in Canada? I haven't seen a big rise in foreclosure rates yet. It's unfortunate that delinquency rates and foreclosure rates are kind of hard stats to get a hold of on a regular basis. But to put things in some perspective, prior to the 2008 housing correction they had there, their mortgage delinquency rate, that's people who are 90 days or more behind on their payments, that was about 3%. To start 2021, I believe nationally, Canada was somewhere around 0.8% at the highest, which is my market here in Saskatchewan, but the Canadian average was something like 0.25%. So mortgage delinquency rates are still really, really low, and I haven't been seeing that increase yet. Yes, at some point, Michael asks, at some point in today's stream, you're going to be talking about the first-time home buyer incentive program. Nope, but I can jump on that right now. So you're talking the first-time home buyer incentive program, not the first-time home buyer program. First-time home buyer incentive program, for those that don't know, if you're buying a resale house in Canada, the government will grant you an additional 5% on your down payment. And if it's a new construction, they'll grant you up to 10%. In exchange, they take an equity stake of either 5 or 10% in your house. Now, if you do not qualify to buy a house, this program will not make you qualified. So that's an area where I think this is a weakness of the program. You already have to qualify. It doesn't help you qualify in any way, shape, or form. Where I struggle a little bit with this is that you take this equity stake in your house. So if your house goes up in value, if you do improvements in the house, and if you're going to be there long term, that house is most likely going to go up in value. And long term, I mean 5+ years, you're going to end up paying back a fair bit more than what you borrowed. but it does have some advantages where your payments will be lower. You have less of CMHC fees, but you do have to pay CMHC fees in this program. You cannot have more than 20%. So if you had, say, for example, like 17% down and you wanted to get that additional 5%, you cannot put 23% down or 22% down on a place type of thing and not pay CMHC fees. You can max out at 19.99. So there's situations where I think that it is good, but for the most part, I'm not really a fan of the program because if you're buying a house, you plan on doing renovations, you want to build a garage, you've immediately given 5% to the government unless you pay out the program before, which you can do that. You can pay that out early. So I hope that helps out there, Michael. Brian, thanks for doing this again. Do you think when immigration ramps up, we're going to see more big gains? Yes, that's, I think, going to be the story. Another story, I already said the story, but another story to the Canadian real estate market is going to be immigration. For some perspective, 2019 was one of the busiest years Canada's ever had. About 325,000 new Canadians came to Canada that year or were given permanent residency. The government is aiming for 425,000 for the next 3 consecutive years. Royal LePage's own stats have talked about what those new Canadians do. Typically, they rent for about 3 to 5 years, and then they do go on and purchase a home. So I think you'll see the rental market be very strong for the next couple of years if the government hits those targets. And then I think you'll see a push for purchases in that 3 to 5 year time frame after those people have been settled in Canada for a while. But I think it's really going to put some life back in the rental market, which is a little bit quiet right now. You've seen Toronto and Vancouver rent rates have been dropping. I think Toronto, this was the first month ever, or not ever, but the first month in 12 months or something like that, that rental rates went up. So that's what I kind of anticipate to see going on for immigration. I think it's going to be a huge story if the government hits those targets. I believe the only time we've had more than 400,000 Canadians in 1 year was something like 1912, somewhere in that time frame. So this is going to be an important factor for the Canadian real estate market for a couple of years. Brendan has Calgary here. All the houses 500,000 to 700,000 we look at and put down asking price, they go for $50,000 immediately. This market is cursed. That is the story across Canada. It's not just Calgary. There are some really aggressive price points, and if it's single family homes, we're seeing multiple offers on pretty much everything across Canada. I mean, even in Toronto, where it's quote unquote cooled down, instead of having 20 offers, they've got 8, type of thing. And so that's just what's going on. We have a really big supply demand imbalance going on right now. Every market in Canada is undersupplied compared to their 5-year averages. And so that, of course, is pushing prices up like crazy. And until that is changed, until you see months of inventory over 3.5, 4 months, like that's only balanced market. 3 to 6 months of inventory is balanced. And most markets in Canada are 2 months or less. There's a lot of places they have 2 weeks of inventory. So that's what's pushing up prices there. And just, it's frustrating as a buyer's agent when I'm working with buyers, and sometimes we have to put offers on 5 or 6 houses before we get one because of how competitive it is right now. So I don't see that changing until we get something with supply. And I'm going to talk about that later in the video, some things I would like to see change or things that I think would help the market here and cool things off. I agree with Brendan's lottery madness. Is there any incentive the government's offering for pre-construction projects, first-time buyers? No. Right now, outside of the first-time home buyer incentive, there are no really incentive programs. People think as first-time home buyers, you get the red carpet rolled out and you get all these awesome things available to you. That's actually not really true. You've got the first-time home buyer plan, which allows you to use RSPs as part of your down payment. You've got the first-time homebuyer incentive program that allows, again, the government will give you a matching or grant you up to 5% on a down payment to help you out with that. And then there are some very specific grant programs for Métis, Aboriginals. We see that a little bit out here where their band will give grants for first-time home buyers, but those are very specific targeted programs. Go check into it in your area if that's maybe something that's available to you. But there's virtually nothing that changed qualification. And something that I'm going to talk about later is I would like to see qualification for first-time homebuyers and credit be more available to them. versus your investor market, the guy that's bought 10 houses already. Does he really need more help to buy his 11th or 12th house versus the person that's scraping every dollar they can together just to get to that 5% minimum down payment? So that's where I'd like to see some programs be put forward. Let's see. Yeah, Kevin Carlson. COVID is all but stopped immigration. Once this is all over, there'll be a big boom. I agree. I see that coming. Doug, so how screwed are late Gen Y and Gen C who don't have inheritance coming that live in the GTA or Vancouver? That's something I talked about in my affordability video I did, where I looked at average benchmark prices and I compared those to the average household incomes, and Toronto and Vancouver, they don't make sense. That's just what it is. My cousin just bought a place in Vancouver, and the amount of money he had to put down just as a down payment would buy a fantastic house in my market. It's crazy. And I just don't see, unless we see some sort of big jump in wages or something like that, how people buying in Vancouver are going to be able to afford on an average income compared to what the house prices are there. And this has been a problem that's been brewing for quite a while, unfortunately. Gabrielle, what's your opinion about these immigration targets you just mentioned? Doesn't a country with such housing affordability crisis, is this going to help? So this is something I was going to get to. It's in my notes for later. The government, I have no doubt, is going to implement in a budget or very soon policies they believe that are going to cool the market. I think most of them are going to be very, very temporary in their effect, but they're going to do Band-Aid type solutions that will look like they're going to have an impact. I'm not sure if they will. And they try to suppress demand. That's a very common tack to the government. They will suppress demand, and they won't address the supply side of the equation. And then they do policies like they have lower interest rates and large immigration targets. So you've got suppressed demand on one side, but yet they're pushing demand with other policies. And so they're just kind of creating a cyclical problem that they are not addressing by addressing supply. So I think that is going to continue to push the market even higher if they hit those targets. Just follow-up question, immigration. Is there enough supply in the market to keep up with 425,000 people a year? No, there's not. And talking about builders having to jump through a lot of hoops. Yes, that's actually one of the things I'm going to talk about. And what would I like to see is the ability for builders to be able to build easier. It is very difficult in a lot of cities to get building permits, to get zoning, to get capital, to get financing so they can actually build these things. And Canada has been in an undersupply situation for quite a while, and this continues to be a bigger problem. So Brian, I think that's going to be continuing to be a problem here. In this hot market, what would you suggest to put down as an offer? Compare the prices using, I'm just looking here. So basically, Brendan's asking in the comments there, I think here, in terms of like, how do you put down a fair offer? What is a fair offer? You know what? This is a question that I deal with. I just had a buyer where we were in a multiple offer situation, and they said, what do you think's the right price? And I told them, I can tell you what I think is the right price. And then I can tell you what I think this house is going to sell for based on the amount of offers that come in. And they're probably not going to be the same number. And that's just what we're in right now. There's so much competition. If you think about it, if you have a house that has 20 or 30 offers on it, one person gets it. That means there's 20 or 30 more people looking for that exact same house. So when another one comes up, you're going to have 20 or 30 more offers. And until we address the supply situation, that's going to go, continue. But what would I do and what did I do? So let's talk exactly about my situation. The house my wife and I bought was multiple offers, and we just made the decision. There was a price we were willing to pay for it. If somebody paid more than us, we were okay with that. If they paid $1 more type of thing, we could sleep at night, but we're going to put our best foot forward and let the chips fall where they may. And that's what we did. We ended up getting a house, and that's what I'm telling my buyers right now. But you've got to have a budget in mind and $1 that makes sense, and then go buy the best house you can. And it might be a little frustrating. Actually, it is going to be frustrating. It's going to be stressful. But that's what you got to do. Set a budget. This is what we can work with, and this is what we're going to do. Yeah, Chris Pittman here. So I've increased immigration from 300,000 people a year to over 400,000 immigrants per year, and that's going to put upward pressure on the market, and it's going to create inflation. Yeah, that's exactly what we're going to continue to see here. So talking overheating, I think that's going to continue until we get into a much, much bigger supply situation where we have way more houses coming on board. ET himself, other than big markets and in general, how do selling prices stack up against assessments? You know, I'm assuming you're talking if you're talking property tax assessments, let's talk about that. In my city, property tax assessments sometimes make sense and sometimes they make absolutely no sense. The city just puts a guesstimated value. If they've never come in the house, they don't know what the features are. They just do a blanket guesstimation. So sometimes they make sense and sometimes they absolutely don't make sense. That's one of the frustrating things when I'm going to list a house. Person says, well, my tax assessment says my house is worth $450,000. Maybe it is and maybe it's not. And you have to show them, hey, here's what's going on actually. So let's get into the stress test here. Let's talk about that for a few minutes. We've been on this overheating for a little bit. Let's talk about stress test and the impacts that that's going to have on things. For those that haven't seen in the news, the regulator is considering or resuming the consideration of changing the stress test from 4.79% to 5.25%. That is for uninsured mortgages. So that means the person has at least 20% down or they're spending more than $1 million. The idea on that is to try to cool down that top end of the market in some of those really hot areas. You know, it reduces that buyer's ability to buy by about 5 to 8% roughly. As what's happened to stress test before, if they ratchet it up, you'll see a little bit of a dip. But what's going to happen first is a huge rush of buyers. So they're talking June 1st is when they're thinking about implementing this. If they do come out and say June 1st is the deadline, you're going to see a huge push right off the bat for those types of people that are right up against those limits where all of a sudden at 5.25% stress test qualification rate, they won't qualify. You're going to see a big push. And then I think you'll see a little bit of a dip in demand. I don't think you'll see prices change much. And then as everybody kind of gets adjusted to the new normal, things will continue on the same trajectory like they have been for a while. I also would not be surprised if they expand this to uninsured or to insured mortgages, so that essentially the entire market will qualify at this 5.25%. And the thing I don't like about the stress test is that it impacts first-time home buyers and younger buyers the most because they're the ones that are scraping together every single dollar. They have lower incomes. They have no equity in a house. They just have their savings. And this is who it impacts the most. And it's an artificial suppressant for demand. It does nothing to address the real problem in my mind, which is supply. So that's what's going on with the stress test. That's what talked about in the news. Matt, can you comment on the difference between high ratio mortgage and a conventional mortgage and the paradigm I have a larger 20% down payment isn't always the cheapest option? So what Chris is talking about, if you have less than 20% down, you are called high ratio. If you have more than 20% down, you're called a conventional purchase. And putting down 20% gives you some advantages and some disadvantages. The advantage is, of course, a larger down payment is going to mean you're borrowing less, so you have less in payments. You are going to also not have to have an insurer qualify you because you don't have to have CMHC or mortgage default insurance. So it actually simplifies your process a little bit. But because you don't have mortgage default insurance, generally your interest rates are actually a little bit higher. So for an insured mortgage right now, you can probably get a fixed rate of about 2.1, 2.2. If you're going uninsured, that interest rate is probably 2.3, maybe 2.4. I think until you get to about 35% down, your interest rate is actually higher. So there's sometimes it actually makes sense to put down like 18 or 19%, get that insured mortgage. Yes, you have the CMHC fees, but you might have a lower rate. So it's not always the best option, but bigger down payments sure give you some flexibility of lower payments. And you also have a lot more runway and cushion because you have more equity in the house should prices decline. Because the last thing you want when you sell a house, and I've had to deal with this in my market when we have big price declines, is people having to write checks to sell their houses. They have to write a check to the bank to make that house go away. That's kind of a shitty situation to be in. Is there a good rule of thumb for condo fees square foot, or would it depend on the building amenities and some of these condo fees are out of control? Yes. No, there's no rule of thumb I think you could go by. You have to look at what those condo fees cover. And one of the important things when you're purchasing a condo, you're going to look at all the condo documents. A lot of people will call this the estoppel package. And you want to make sure that condo is being run well, that they're not wasting money, and that their reserve fund and their financials are all in order. So you've got to look at all that information. That's one of the biggest things when you're buying a condo, is looking at a stop hole package. So that's an important one here. Let's jump to things I think are going to cool the market. And well, I'm not saying they're good things, but these are some things that would cool the market here. So let's jump into that real quickly here. And again, if you guys got some things you guys think would be important to talk about in terms of cooling the market, let's talk about that as well here in the comments. Run to my notes here. So some things that will cool down the market. I'm not saying these are good. I was writing some of these off here, or writing these down. So interest rates, if they go up a whole bunch, that's going to cool off the market. Shorter amortization. So instead of being able to purchase your house over 25 years, they shorten it down to 20 years. It's going to make housing more expensive in terms of your monthly payment. That will suppress demand. Larger down payments. So if you, instead of having to have a minimum of 5%, if all of a sudden they say the minimum down payment is 10%, that will shut out a lot of buyers out of the market. And all of a sudden you're going to see lower demand. Higher qualification standards. CMHC did this. They bumped their qualification standards if you have a CMHC insured mortgage, but their competitors did not follow suit. And so as a result, CMHC is losing a lot of market share because there are buyers that could not qualify for a CMHC insured mortgage. They're going to the competitors Canada Guarantee and Sagen. Higher taxes. So whether it's land transfer taxes, anything like that, any fees associated with, they're tacked on to a purchase. Now, I was doing some quick research on this before when I put this in a topic. Already, Canada has some of the highest land transfer and real estate related taxes in the developed world. But if we do have higher taxes, that would, of course, suppress demand. And kind of, what do you guys think? Is there some things you think, and I'm going to quickly check the comments here, but what are some of the things you guys think that would cool off the market in addition to what I've talked about here? I mean, maybe they're good ideas, maybe they're not, but let's talk about them. Yeah, Chris Pittman talks about when condo fees go up, the unit value goes down. Yes, because obviously less people want to pay those high condo fees, but also it is important in your qualification. When you're buying a house, you don't have any maintenance fees associated with your qualification requirements. But when you buy a condo, those condo fees are included in your qualification. So if you have, for example, I think it's like for every $100 that condo fees go up, I think it reduces how much you can actually buy by like $15,000 or $20,000. So if you have condo fees that are $500 or $600 a month, it's going to really reduce what you can actually spend total purchase price. So that's what's going to bring down the value of those condos. Kevin Carlson, 35% down. Quite a few mortgage brokers, lenders have the same rates as insured. Yeah, I thought that was kind of the cutoff at about 35%. You get back to insured rates, and so you get that 10 or 20 basis point drop in interest rates. Learning IT, can you explain more about POTL fees? Sorry, can you explain the acronym there? I've never heard of POTL fee, so just put that in the comments. I'll get back to that. Would capital gains tax on flipping cool down the market? I'm going to get to that in 1 second here. I'll go talk about what I'd like to see in the market, then we'll get to capital gains. So let's do that right now. Let's jump over to talking about what I would like to see that I think would have a big impact on the real estate market, what will cool things down, or at least make housing more affordable. So more supply. I can't harp on that enough. I'd like to see more supply in the market. We need it. And it can't just be any type of house. It has to be targeted. And it was an article I was reading just a couple of days ago talking about kind of the missing middle. We have lots of smaller condos that were being built and lots of really big expensive houses, but nothing in the middle. And that is an area of weakness. Look at my market in Regina here. The meat and potatoes of our market is from about $250,000 to $400,000. That's about 60% of all sales happen in that. And that is ultra competitive right now because we're really low in supply in that type of house. So, the supply would really, really help us, and that would stabilize things. If we get back to a balanced market, 3 to 6 months of inventory across the country, you're going to see prices stabilize. You're not going to see crazy bidding wars. People are going to be able to go out and find the right house and do all their inspections and not panic when they're trying to buy a house. And contrary to what a lot of people say in the comments, I don't want houses to go up forever. I've had people say, well, you want houses to go up so you can make some more money. Let's do some quick math on that and see if that makes sense. My market in Regina, somebody's going to spend about 10% more than the benchmark price, so about $30,000. I make a grand total of $600 more. I would much rather two people go out and buy houses because housing is affordable and more people can buy houses. I make a whole heck of a lot more money than the $600 if I could convince somebody to spend 10% more on a house in my market. So I would love it if we were in a more balanced market where neither the buyers or sellers kind of have a real advantage over each other, and we can go and kind of take their time, find the right house, do all of our inspections. We're not panicked and just jumping on the first thing that shows up. So that's actually what I'd like a more stable market where things just kind of plod along and it's more calm. That's what I would rather have. This is one programs. I put this as programs to help first-time home buyers. And I want to talk about a program we had in my province of Saskatchewan. I thought was a fantastic program. I wish that there was something like this. They canceled after 1 year, but I wish this would have continued. And I wish there's something like it. So in Saskatchewan, if you get a university degree or a trade or any sort of higher education past high school, there is a tax rebate for that. It depends what you got, how long you're in school for, how much of a rebate that is. If you get a 4-year degree, for example, it's a $20,000 provincial tax credit. What they offered for 1 year only was that you could pull $10,000, so 50% of whatever your grant was. You could actually pull that out right off the bat and you could put it as your down payment. So a couple in Saskatchewan could pull $20,000, $10,000 each out of their graduate retention is what it was called. It was designed to keep people in Saskatchewan. They could pull that out, and with $20,000 down, you have a lot of options in my province to buy a house. Again, with our average prices are about $300,000. So you can buy a really nice house for $300,000, and you've got that $20,000 that's essentially is granted to you from the government as long as you stay in. I think you had to be in the house, I think it was minimum of 3 years. If you sold it before 3 years, there was a bunch of tax implications. I really like that program. I would like to see programs like that for people who have just finished school. Whether it's some sort of a tax rebate is great, but in the case of actually giving them money for a down payment, I thought this was fantastic. So I would love to see programs like that. Let's jump back into the questions here. Inventory is up, but prices are still high. What's driving prices up? Inventory is down. Listings jumped up a bunch there. That drink, I'm dying here. We saw listings surge across Canada this past month, and I talked about it in my market update. Part of that is people feeling more comfortable putting their house on the market this year where they may have not been comfortable last year. I think there's some FOMO, fear of missing out, from sellers as well right now, where they're going, holy crap, house prices are so high. I was talking to an agent earlier today, and he talked about how he's got people who bought a house a couple of years ago. They're going, I can sell this house and I can pull a bunch of money out of it. This is life-changing for me. And so they are. So you did see some people who put their house up in the market because they're going to get big dollars for it. In markets like mine in Regina, where we had prices that have been declining for a number of years, all of a sudden prices have jumped up, and sellers who were planning to move but couldn't because they'd have to write a check to get out of that house because house prices declined, all of a sudden now they can make that move that they were planning on doing anyways, and now they cannot lose money. So that's why you see that big jump in listings, but you saw it matched by demand as well. So inventories still are down across Canada. How about more restrictions for investors and speculation to cool off the market? Yes, but a lot of people, I think, don't realize there already is speculation taxes in Vancouver, I believe, has it. And I think Toronto as well right now has speculation taxes. And I think you're going to see a national one. But there already is a speculation tax for all intents and purposes. If it's not owner occupied, you've bought a house and you don't move into it, you have income tax implications on that, capital gains taxes. So there already is a speculation tax, but I truly don't believe we are seeing the bulk of purchases are speculators. It's end users. That's what I'm seeing. I don't see anybody that's speculating of people I deal with. Again, I'm talking a much smaller market, but when I talk to friends across Canada, they're not seeing their clients that are speculators, just end users they're buying. That's what's driving the market now, is end users buying houses. It's not speculators. I do think the government's going to put a speculation tax in because it's something that they can sell easily to the public. I actually don't think it's going to have much of an impact. You'll see a psychological impact. You'll probably see a little bit of a slowdown. And then a few months later, whether it's 3 months, 6 months, 8 months, whatever it is, you're going to see things return back to normal. We saw this in Ontario when they put in their foreign buyer tax. They put it in like it was immediate effect type of thing, scared the crap out of everybody, tanked the market for about a half a year, and things just continued on exactly the way they were. So I think you'll see that if they implement a speculation tax. I think we'll realize that it's not as much of a factor as people are thinking it is. It's end users are buying houses. Parcel of tied land fees. I actually am going to have to do some research on that because that's not a topic I know very well. I'll maybe plug Chris Pittman here and see if he knows that really well. See if he can comment on it. I actually don't know that stuff very well. But I'll do some research on it. And maybe I can even get back to you later on. Karthik, thank you for making those wonderful live presentations. Could you please tell me how much overassessment is fair price to pay in Moncton? You know what? It's got to be what you feel comfortable with in terms of this is what I feel this house is worth and this is what I'm willing to pay for that house. That's the offer you put in. At the end of the day, a house is worth what a buyer will pay for it and what a seller's willing to sell it for. I mean, that sounds simplistic, but that is what it is. So go forward with an offer that makes sense to you. Talk with your agent about what they're seeing in the market. They're going to have to tell you, hey, here's what I think this house is worth, but here's what you might need to pay to actually get this house. That's what's going on. Talking with a friend of mine in Montreal, he said, how do I give people fair comparables to look at when prices are increasing 2 and 3 months a year? It's like I just throw out the comparables. It doesn't mean anything anymore with how fast things are selling and how much prices are increasing. There just isn't comparables because of that. 2-3% a month, 6 months down the road, it just doesn't even make sense anymore to look at those sales. Increased supply is the best bet, but it takes too long. And that's one of the things I think why we haven't seen governments commit to increasing supply is because that's hard and it takes a long time. You would need to put programs in place probably for a decade or more to really have a long-term meaningful impact on the market. And most governments aren't able or willing to put that type of forethought forward and to address the problem. We've been in this undersupply situation. This just didn't show up overnight. This has been building for years. If you look at, I think Montreal is probably one of the best examples, and Ottawa. Go back 5 years. I've got all the data. I've been collecting it for a long time, and I've got really good charts. But you can look basically every year. Inventory is down by half. Boom, 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 keeps dropping. So this has been building in Montreal and Ottawa, for example, since 2014, 2015. They've been seeing inventory continue to decline. And this was going to happen. This really hot market in those areas was going to happen. It was just a matter of time because nothing was being done to address that supply problem. If we're buying our first house, should we still keep in mind of resale value 5 years, 10 years down the road? We're living in a condo. We're not in a rush. We'll wait a few months. If you're buying a house and you're living in it long term, there's not very often that somebody who buys a house 10 years down the road, that they're worse off 10 years down the road than the day they bought it. Yes, we can have market corrections. Again, we went through one in my market. From 2012 to 2019, we saw prices decline about 25%. Now that's a citywide average. Some areas were affected far less and some far more. But if buying that house improves your lifestyle today, I would think long and hard about that. If you're going to be there long term, and that's what I talk about in my buyer biometer, is you're planning on buying this year because that's going to improve your lifestyle. Go out and find the best house you can. Maybe things will slow down later on this year for single family. It's something I could see happening, but by that time prices might be 10 or 15% higher anyways. So go out and find the best house you can if it's a long-term house, and usually long-term, the market tends to correct itself and up or down, and you're probably going to be in a position where you're better off because not only has that potentially gone up in value, you've paid that down. You've got a ton of equity into that house. You look at mortgage rates right now, how low they are. You can pay off thousands of dollars a month, depending what your purchase price is, down on that principal, and you could have $70,000 or $100,000 in equity into that house very easily in just 5 years. So that's what I'd be doing. That's what I did. I'm not worried about the long-term prices because I'm worried about resale value. I'm always worried about it, but I know I'm going to be here for a long period of time. And that's what I tell my buyers. If you're going to be here a long period of time, the market will tend to work itself out and you'll be in a better position in 10 years than you were today. Anna Marie just bought a house, signed the paper with her lawyer tomorrow. Awesome. Congratulations. That, I'm sure, as you know, is an extremely exciting but stressful time, but I'm really happy for you. Is it possible an extended locked-in mortgage rate for one extra month due to a delay from builders after initial 120 days has elapsed? In terms of getting your rates extended, I'll let somebody like Kevin jump in on this one. I'm not sure what the process is if there's a delay on possession in terms of if those rates are extended. I believe the answer is going to be yes if you've already signed contracts because your mortgage rate then is locked in. If you have not actually physically purchased the home and signed all the documents, that may be a little different, but I'll let Kevin jump in on that one. So, I get back to kind of what I was talking about here. What would I like to see in the market to improve things? I want to see programs available and capital, loans available, down payment type assistance. That's got to go to first-time home buyers because that is what keeps the market going. So those are the types of people I want to see have help in the market. If you're buying your 10th house, you're buying your 10th investment property, I don't really think that you need that extra help there. So I would like to see help that way, shape, or form. And supply. We've got to get more houses built. We've got to get more affordable options for people built. We can't just build expensive houses and we can't just build super small little condos that only work for a single person or maybe a young couple. We've got to build houses that work for that middle of the market, young families, and growing families. That's who this has got to be focused on. And it's going to involve long-term effort from all levels of government to make that happen. And that's the thing is I just don't know if all governments can get on the same page right now and commit to something that's going to be as long-term as adding a lot of supply into the market, especially when, as I talked earlier, policies like immigration and low interest rates are encouraging demand and then are not addressing the supply problem. Anna Marie, thanks so much. It's been hard. I got a bit surprised of an extra $5,000 in a quoted legal fee. It was a bank interest program you talked about. I thought it went back at the end. I didn't know it. Yes, sometimes legal fees can jump up and bite you. Make sure you talk thoroughly with the lawyer as well as your mortgage broker and your agent before and say, hey, is there anything coming up? But it happens. And you never know when a lender or something's going to throw you a wild card. I got thrown a wild card in my purchase where they wanted a significant amount of additional capital on top of our down payment to actually make that deal happen. So you get thrown some wild cards and you're buying houses. It happens. Aaron, come back to Canada after 7 years abroad, no credit history, self-employed. Can I still get a mortgage in Saskatchewan with enough of a down payment? First of all, thank you, Aaron. That is a mortgage broker question. A couple of things. You're going to need Canadian credit history, or depending where you were, if you're in a country that has recorded credit history like the UK, for example, or even an EU, that will really help you if the mortgage broker can pull that credit. So that's a little bit more of a mortgage broker question, but depending where you're coming from, yes, probably that's something that can be done. It just really depends whether they can pull credit history and stuff like that from where you were previously. If you don't mind letting me know, tell me where you're coming from, and you're looking to buy in Saskatchewan. Tell me looking where you're buying in Saskatchewan and why. Why are you coming back? Are you from Saskatchewan? I'd be curious to know. Let's talk about capital gains exemptions. Let's do that one. That one's going to be a fun one to talk about. This is something from Chile. Welcome back. Brian Taylor's posted an important question before. Oh, sorry, I missed a question, Brian. Have you seen many builders increase the cost of building after the contract is signed because of material costs? Lumber's gone up. Yeah, we're seeing material costs go through the roof right now. I've got friends doing renovations on houses. I know guys building places, and they're having a lot of difficulty with getting contractors to agree on prices because things are just going up so quickly. I think though, if you have a signed deal and a firm price, I would say that would be very difficult for them to then increase that price. That's obviously a lawyer's question, but if you've got a contract signed, that's going to be a tough sell for them to try to increase prices after that. So sorry I missed that question, Brian. Aaron's from Saskatchewan originally, buying near Saskatoon. It's my hometown, actually. Although I am talking about being from Regina, I was actually technically born in Saskatoon. born in Saskatoon by accident. I was born a little early. My parents had gone up Saskatoon to visit family and friends, and I was born that night actually that they drove up. So kind of funny little story about me, but I'm technically from Saskatoon, raised in Regina. So let's get on to mortgage or capital gains. Sorry, mortgages. I'm thinking about mortgages, talking about capital gains. There's a lot of talk in the news right now about whether we should be changing the capital gains exemption. So if you are owner occupying a home, there is no capital gains on that house if you sell it. So if there's $100,000 gain in property value and you sell it, there's no tax implications for owner occupied. There is for investor occupied or investment properties. If you don't own or occupy that home, there is huge tax implications. But they're talking about removing that, or at least some people say that's what we need to do. And here's kind of my thoughts on that. First of all, yes, it maybe levels the playing field between the people that own houses and the people that don't, because essentially this is now becoming a wealth transfer from people who own houses to people who don't own houses. That's essentially what a capital gains tax on owner-occupied homes would be. I'm not sure if it's actually going to have the desired effect, which would be slowing down the real estate market or cooling things off. And I'm not sure if it's better for buyers. Here's why. If you own your home and you're going to be moving because you want to have your kids go to a different school, maybe you've got a different job opportunity, you just want to go to a different neighborhood, maybe you need a bigger house because your family's growing. If you're going to have a really big tax bill to sell that house, are you going to move? And the answer, I think, for some people is going to be no. I'm going to sit tight. My kids will go to the school that I didn't want them to go to, but it's cheaper than the big tax bill. Or I'm not going to take that job because, yeah, maybe it pays me more and it's in a city that I want to go to, but if I've got a huge tax bill I got to pay, I'm not going to move. And so why that isn't better for buyers, we have less supply. I think that's what ends up happening if you start having a capital gains tax on people's primary residences. I think you end up with less supply on the market because you get people who just choose not to put their houses on the market because they're going to have to pay that big tax bill. Hello from PEI. Thanks for checking in. That's got to be late. What are you guys, like 3 hours, 4 hours behind us here in Saskatchewan? So thanks for checking in so late. And Brian, I'm glad I got that question answered for you. So that's kind of my thoughts on capital gains. I'm not sure if it's the best use of policy. Now let's get into the big topic and blind bids and how that's going to affect the market. This is something that is hot in the news right now. We need to eliminate blind bidding because that will be better for the market. It'll be, make things better for buyers. And so what I'm going to talk about is some reasons why I think it's maybe good and reasons why I think it's bad. I want your thoughts as we're going through in the comments below. What do you guys think? Should we remove blind bidding as a measure to make things more fair for buyers? I'll quickly check the comments here as you guys are chiming in. So we signed an agreement of purchase, sale. So can we extend our locked-in mortgage rate for an extra month? Yeah, I think you're going to be able to do that. Talk with your mortgage broker about that. Innovative building methods like 3D printing. Yes, I'd like to see that. Labor and costs obviously is a huge component to building. But if this works, Canada doesn't stifle innovation with regulation. Yes, let's reduce as many barriers so builders can build as long as it's being built right and properly and all the standards are being adhered to, everything like that. But let's get more people building houses. Let's get more affordable options so that buyers can get out and buy houses at affordable prices. So let's go with that. Hello from Montreal. Thanks very much for checking in, Randy from Montreal. Learning IT, thanks for valuable information your channel is providing consumers. It's something I really enjoyed doing. This was kind of a fun project. That's how it started, and it's grown into this, and I've had a lot of fun. But let's talk about blind bidding and whether removing that is going to be good for buyers or not. So let's talk about some specific situations and why it might be good, why it might be bad here. I'll grab my notes here so I don't miss anything that I had. From the outside, I've seen a lot of articles about if we just remove blind bidding, that's the magic bullet. That will make the real estate market more fair, more transparent. That will solve all the world's problems in the real estate market right now. I'm not sure if it is, but let me get into some reasons why it's important that maybe we have open bidding. And I was talking with an agent yesterday about kind of some dealings that he had. And he talked about a situation where he was actually buying a house. It was an auction, basically. And this, well, it was an auction for this house. They had a amount that they were willing to pay because they're buying this as an investment property. And if they paid more than that, the numbers didn't make sense for what they needed to put into it and what they were planning on renting out for. So they put their bids in, and as soon as it crossed a certain point, they walked away. This auction house, though, it was straight cash. You had an opportunity to investigate the property before, but you were buying this house in cash. There were no conditions to it, and you had to have the money right there. And that day, basically, as soon as you put your hand up and said, I'm buying this house, if you won that bid, you were buying it. Period. End of story. So in the case of a purely cash-only transaction, here's $500,000 for your house. Blind bidding maybe isn't a great thing. Having open bids where every buyer has an opportunity to see where they stack up, I think there's some advantages to that. But let's talk about some things that I'm concerned with. And that is, where do we start and where do we finish the idea of open bids? Because price is an important factor when buying a home, but it's not the only factor. I'm just going to check some comments here. Nothing big new, but thank you everybody who's been checking in. But let's talk about blind bids. So we're going to have it so that everybody knows what the purchase price that every other buyer is offering. Okay, that allows you to say, okay, this person's offering $450,000. I really want this house. I'm going to offer $455,000 so I can get that house. My concern then becomes a couple of things. One, is this better for buyers, or does this actually create more panic? Oh my God, this guy offered $455 now, so I have to offer $460 for it. Does it actually create more panic in the market? I'd be curious to know. I was thinking maybe I could talk with like an auctioneer or something like that and say, when you've seen blind bids versus open bids, what ends up with higher sale prices? I'd be really curious to see, and I've never seen some studies on that, but that would be an interesting topic to dive into. But deals are more than just dollars. There's a lot of things and a lot of reasons why sellers will choose to buy or choose to sell their house, and what will go into that, what's important to them. So a couple of things. Purchase price is obviously important, but as well, conditions. Are there conditions? What are the conditions? What is the financial strength of that buyer in terms of what are they at for down payment? And deposits matter. Maybe that buyer is buying that house, but it's subject to the sale of their home, for example. So these are some things. Possession day is another one where they matter in a deal. And a seller is going to look at those offers, and maybe the possession day from one offer makes sense. And maybe that offer isn't the highest offer, but they go, we need to move out by this certain date, so that's what we want to take. Or maybe that saves a mortgage payment, or it makes something else an option for us. So it's not just purchase price that matters in a deal. And that's where I question in terms of, okay, we're going to have open bids, but what is open? Is it just the price? Or is it now going to be purchase price and the possession date and the inclusions and everything else that goes into a deal? And then that becomes a question of privacy. So again, say for example, the person has to sell their house before they can actually buy this one. So it's conditional to sell another house. Well, now you have some serious privacy concerns, because you can look up that address and figure out exactly who lives there. I mean, I think that opens up a big can of worms. People are saying we need to have open bids. That will solve this problem. I think, though, that you have to look at what else goes into a deal. And if we're just having, again, open bids, but we're not going to talk about all the other things that are in that offer, conditions, price, or possession day, things like that. Is that buyer fully informed, or are they only partially informed? Again, does that solve the problem? Does the seller have to accept the highest price? Do they lose the ability to pick who they want to sell the house to? I have had this before where I've written offers and we were the highest offer. I knew we were the highest offer because the agent told me you actually were the highest purchase price, but the sellers chose to sell to the buyer because they knew that buyer. That was important to them, that the house went to somebody that they knew. Or a deal that I just put together, the agent came with multiple offers. The agent came and presented the offer directly to sellers. He did a fantastic job, and he built a personal connection with those sellers. And we had some complications still, but at the end of the day, they said, this is the person we want to work with. We felt most confident they would put the deal together. We liked the agent. We loved these buyers. They wrote a really good letter as to why that they should be able to buy this house. And that was something that really mattered to these sellers. So I'm not sure if open bidding is the magic bullet that some people are proposing it is. So those are some things that, I think goes into this. There's a lot more moving pieces in a deal than just purchase price. So open bidding, I'm not 100% sure if that is the ultimate solution. And the other side of this is when you have offer dates. So you're going to have a house that's going to go on the market, say Thursday. You're going to have showings Friday, Saturday, Sunday, review offers on Monday. In that situation, generally, but not always, it's you put your best offer. We're going to look at them all at 3:00, and we're going to pick the buyer that we think, for whatever reason, makes the most sense to deal with. Maybe it's possession, maybe it's purchase price, maybe it's a gut feeling, right? There could be a lot of different reasons. So that's where I want as much open and transparency in this market as possible, while still protecting buyers and sellers and specific privacy. I'm a big proponent of privacy, and at the end of the day, a purchase of a house is a private transaction between a buyer and a seller, and they're two private individuals. So those are things that I'm really concerned with open bids, but I do like the idea of opening this up. I'm just not sure what the correct answer is in terms of how we make this more transparent, better. I'm not sure, but I'd like to see some more people looking into this versus just saying this is the magic bullet solution. MLSS, hello. Thank you for jumping in. So that's kind of my thoughts on things. That's my topics I had for today, but I'm going to continue to leave this open here, and let's answer some questions. If you guys have got them, go ahead, fire away, and let's answer some questions for a little while here. I got a little battery life left in the camera, so let's keep going. And let me know what you think. Blind bidding. Should we remove blind bidding? Is that the solution to our ills right now in the Canadian real estate market? But leave it open for you guys. If you have more questions, I'm going to make sure to scroll through, make sure I didn't miss anything. But so far, I think I've got every question answered. Double check. There's some awesome questions. And as always, guys, thanks very much for joining me. I really appreciate everybody that has come on and the people have supported me through the years on this channel. It's been a year and a half now almost I've been doing this, something like that. So the people belong for the ride the whole time. I really appreciate all of you and all of your help. Don't have any more questions. We'll give it another minute or two for questions. And if not, we'll wrap things up. If you want to come back to this, I'm going to segment this all out as well, so you guys can watch this after if people have jumped off. So thanks very much. Looks like we got no more questions here by the looks of things, so I will wrap this up. We're just over an hour here, and for some of you guys on the East Coast there, that is getting late. Oh, we got one question just popped in. How often do you see asbestos and your thoughts on it? In my market, we typically see asbestos-based products in sometimes in the 50s, but more 60s-ish. It depends what it is, where it is. So if it's up in the attic, in the insulation, I don't really worry about it, because unless you're planning on going up in your attic and rolling around in it and breathing that in, it's not a safety health hazard to you. But where it becomes a big challenge is, for example, asbestos ceiling tiles or floor tiles. We see a lot of that in my market. So if you're doing renovations, you've got to then properly get that removed, and that adds a lot of expense to your renovation. So it's something that absolutely you have to be aware of, and it's going to add additional costs if you have to remove it. So it's one of the things, know what you're getting into if there's asbestos. How often? Well, thanks very much. Is UFFI no longer an issue? Sorry, just explain the acronym UFFI. I am just unsure of what the acronym is. Duct insulation. Yes, I've seen it in ducts as well. So that's where your home inspection is going to pick that up, and they're going to go through that. And then you've got to, at that point, figure out if that is a health and safety hazard. We don't really see it much in our ducts here, but I do know in other areas we do see it as well. I'll let Steve just give him a second here to finish off that question. But yeah, asbestos is one of those things you have to be aware of. and just know the risk. And it has to be something you can tolerate. And this kind of, you're going to see this come up, I guess, in my talks and home inspections, that no house is perfect, and it's what is your level of tolerance? What can you deal with? So those are some things here. So MLSS, I have an $80,000 mortgage and a $90,000 home equity line of credit. I need about 30 grand in renos. What should I do? I can't really give you a fair assessment on what you should do. It's got to be what works out, for you personally, what's going to make the most sense. So I'm sorry, I can't really make a comment on that as to what's the best idea. Here's a good one. Should we be concerned about a house with lead in it? That's another one. We see it in pipes and things like that. So you might have to get water tested. That's something we see in my market. We see lead pipes, water lines coming in. The city's been removing them. And I think there's only a couple of % of houses now in the city that have lead pipes. But yeah, that's something that you're going to have to look into and bring in the appropriate professional to look at that and see if that is a health and safety hazard. Just in time. I like that name. I love your content. Thank you very much for checking in. Give it a few more minutes here and see if a few more questions come in. I appreciate all your questions, guys. And I appreciate all the awesome comments you guys have given me over the years. There's been some great videos ideas I've gotten. And if you have video ideas, leave them, in the comment section of other videos, and I'll address that. If you have a topic you want me to cover, let me know. Make sure I didn't miss any more comments, but I think I've got most of them. Give it a couple more minutes here, maybe 1 or 2 more minutes, and we'll wrap this up. We'll say 8:15. That's my time. 5 more minutes here, and we'll wrap this up if there's no more questions. But as well, let me know what you want for videos, coming up in the future. Urea formaldehyde foam insulation. Sorry, I missed that. It's not something we see very much here in my market, so I don't deal with it. But again, you're going to have to talk with your home inspector and know what the risks are going to be, what the mitigation process is going to be if you have to remove that. So that's more of a home inspector question for your local market there. With 5-year fixed rates rising gradually now, is it advisable to opt for a variable? So I went for a variable mortgage for myself because of that being based on the Bank of Canada's rate. I said, you know what, they're planning on keeping these rates low for a while. I'm going to pay down my mortgage with these low interest rates as much as I possibly can. Those interest rates obviously will come up, I would expect, at some point here. So I'm going to ride the wave. The way I saw it was my interest rate was 1.4 that I got on a variable. At the time, 2.1 was a fixed rate. Interest rates got to go up an awful lot on the variable rate for me to even get to that 2.1, let alone exceed that, where I'd actually be in a worse position. So I went with a variable for my mortgage personally. Are there foreclosures or any other non-traditional routes to finding deals in Regina? Good question. Foreclosure in Regina, if I pulled that up, I bet you there's less than 100 foreclosures in the entire market in Regina. And unlike in the States where foreclosures, they're fire sales, they're smoking deals, that's not generally the case in Canada. And that is because if there was mortgage default insurance on the property, and even if the buyer had 20% down, there are times that bank will actually go and get default insurance on their own in case that does happen. But for the banks to get that default insurance policy paid out to them, they have to put that house on the market and they have to show they went and got market value for it and still lost money. It still cost them money. So they're going to get appraisals and usually real estate agents in to come give them opinions of value. And if they still get it sold and they've lost money, that's what's going to trigger that insurance policy. So they're not fire sales, they're not smoking deals. But how do you find a good deal in Regina right now? Talk with your agent and have them ears to the ground to find stuff that's coming up. And that's what they're going to be looking for. Good deals, good houses in good neighborhoods, that type of thing. Or they know, for example, a guy that's got a couple of houses they want to sell because they're retiring and want to get out of them. So that's probably, I think, your best way to find the best deals on houses. Let's go back here. Current rates, I think fixed rates are about 2.1 right now, and your variables are about 1.5, give or take. A lot of people get really fixated on interest rates. I think that's kind of putting the blinders on a little bit. Interest rates are important. Let's not play that down. But portability and flexibility on that mortgage is really important. If you have to break that mortgage early, what is your payroll penalty? That's something to really look into. Some of these rock bottom mortgage rates are really, really good rates, but if you have to break that mortgage, the payroll penalties are outrageous and really prohibitive. So look at that. As well, do you have prepayment options if you would like to do so? So some mortgages don't have the ability to pay them early, pay lump sums on them, those types of things. So you want to look at that, as well as portability. If you decide you've got a great mortgage and really like it and you want to buy a new house and port that mortgage, the ability to do so is important. So don't get fixated on 10 or 20 basis points. Look at the mortgage as a whole package before deciding to go with that mortgage and know all those details. MLSS, what do you think will happen to mortgage rates with Bank of Canada announcement on the 21st? I think you're going to see them stay the same. I don't think you're going to see rates increase. The Bank of Canada has been kind of signaling this a little bit, at least from what I'm reading when I read the tea leaves. They have said, yes, these low interest rates have had kind of some unintended consequences in terms of the real estate market is absolutely on fire right now, but they've talked about it being important to keep rates low, to keep loans low, so that employers can continue to bring people on or make capital investments they have to in their business. So for the economy as a whole, I don't think you're going to see a rate jump just yet. I think they're going to stick to these low rates, even if it means that house prices continue to accelerate like they are. Oh, did I miss anything else here? Just in time, keep doing what you're doing. Thank you very much. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to wrap this up because we are at 8:15 now, but I am going to continue to do these. I'm going to try to do these once a month. I'll give you about a week heads up. I'll put it out on my different social media accounts. I'll put it up in the YouTube community section, it's called, and I'll have the video posted about a week before so you guys can see when it's coming. I'll let you know on the topics I want to discuss. And as well, I'm going to expand this to have other agents, other mortgage brokers, things like that, so we can have more of a conversation. But I will give you that heads up so when we do these before. I like doing these. These are a lot of fun. So let's keep doing these. What's your views on builders selling new homes with bidding? Boy, that is really something that is frustrating, but that's just what's going on with how hot the market is. I was talking to the agent in Ottawa, and that's exactly what they're seeing. They're taking bids because they can get it. That's just what's going on right now with how hot things are. What books do you recommend to get started in real estate? T, are you talking as an agent or as an investor? I'll give you a second to answer that for me here, and I'll get back to that. Actually, I'll start answering that in terms of what books do you recommend. I'm going to start as an agent. One guy that I really, really like is a guy named Brian Buffini, and he is a real estate coach, and he's got some really good lessons on the way he likes to market. So that's one that I really like there. He's got some really good books, and I think he's got one, it was out a couple of years ago, called The Immigrant Edge or something like that. That was really good. So checking it, it was more on the importance of new immigrants, and he's an American, but it has a lot of the same lessons to Canada. MLS says, any chance of adding Hamilton to your city reviews? I've thought really hard about expanding the market update, but right now it's a fairly large project for me to take on, and I'm going to look at expanding or maybe splitting it up to some smaller markets and bigger markets. So I haven't decided. I would like to add Hamilton or Moncton or Kamloops or something like that in the future. So those are some of the things I'm thinking about doing, but just not right yet because it's a fairly big project to take on. That market update probably takes me about 10 to 15 hours minimum, maybe even 20 to put that all together. It's a fairly significant investment for me to do. Thank you very much for everybody. I'm going to wrap this up here. I know I said that already, but I do have to get going. So thank you very much for everybody that has joined me so far, and I'm excited to do this in the future. Thanks for watching, everybody, and have yourselves a great night.